So look, this is going to be a fairly negative video, and I don't enjoy that. I don't like making these negative sort of videos. If you scroll through my YouTube feed, you're not going to see many. There's a few here and there when things, get frustrating enough or hit this kind of critical mass or critical mess, if you will, of problems. I feel like I got to step back and acknowledge some of the things that have gone awry and do my best to represent your interests as a player so that you feel, spoken for. And it's important for us to be vocal and showcase the bad with the good. I much prefer just playing the game and having fun and building some goofy decks and trying to win here and there and hanging out with you guys. If I could do that every single day forever, I would, but I think it's important for videos like this to exist. So on that note, keep in mind, I am not going to be good at making this kind of video. This is going to be rambly, hopefully not too ranty. I don't want to get like too emotional behind this. I want to just break down what's happening and explain it to you. But nonetheless, I'm sure I'll ramble. I'm sure this will not be concise. I'll do my best to organize it through like timestamps down there. So with all of that said, let's talk about why this video is being made today. And it's because of this new Darkhawk bundle that showed up on the shop last night. It is a $30 bundle that sells you a variant, which by the way is a very cool looking variant. I'll acknowledge that. Portrait of the same art, 1,000 credits, and a bunch of boosters for Darkhawk. And that's $30 in the US, of course, varying prices elsewhere, but probably roughly equivalent when considering exchange rates. And listen, I will maintain that $30 for a cosmetic in any game is absolutely obscene. We've like normalized cosmetic prices at like $15 to $50 now in games. That is crazy. I remember the era of the horse armor discourse way back in Oblivion when a couple bucks for a cosmetic was laughed off the planet. And now like whatever, 15, 20 years later, suddenly we're okay with like $30 skins. That said, I'm not going to judge people. If you think it's worth $30, it's your money. You do what you want, right? I'm sad that we've normalized it and that you have to spend 30 when you could probably spend 5 a while ago and have gotten the same cool stuff. But no judgment here. Legitimately, I don't like buying cosmetics, but I've spent plenty of money on this game to advance my progression. A lot of people would think I'm crazy. So we're in the same boat here. The game is obscenely expensive, which we've known forever. That hasn't changed. But this Darkhawk bundle, despite that, is probably still way more expensive than normal and expected. It feels like one of the worst bundles we've seen in a while, especially compared to the other bundle that just came out, which actually felt like reasonable value compared to the rest of the Marvel Snap bundles. I would still maintain super expensive in the scheme of the universe, but decent for Marvel Snap. But the real kind of the slap in the face with this Darkhawk bundle, I think, for many people, is that it was presented with this 3x value banner, suggesting that, in fact, this Darkhawk bundle is really valuable. We think here at Marvel Snap that this bundle is worth $90 and that you're getting a giant discount when you buy it for $30. And that to me is just so absurd to see and hear. And this is all in light of the fact, or connected to the fact, that Darkhawk is a card that people expected to drop in series a long time ago, but the Second Dinner team has seemingly arbitrarily kept Darkhawk artificially at a higher series than expected for longer than expected. So it feels like, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to drop Darkhawk when we're supposed to or expected to. They never explicitly said they were going to drop these cards at this cadence, but that was the kind of expectation they laid out. They didn't rush to correct anybody in those expectations. They'd followed a model. The model suddenly changed without notice, and then boom, to follow it up immediately, you get this really expensive Darkhawk bundle, which for anybody who's not in the know, when you buy a cosmetic variant in Marvel Snap, you can use that as the collectible card. So this can be a proxy way for people to buy Darkhawk directly instead of going through the normal progression systems and collect your tokens to unlock the surprisingly expensive Darkhawk via that mechanism instead. It just felt like this sort of skeevy, shady, perfect storm of like coincidences if you will, where this all lined up. It's like, yeah, man, I don't know, that feels really bad. And I think that 3x banner in particular just really drove it home. If you had any one of these things happening individually, you know, people probably would have wouldn't have paid too much attention. They probably wouldn't have had too many problems. But when it all added up into this one perfect moment, everybody's like, hey, wait a minute, this feels really bad. And people have shared that sentiment. Not only this video, of course, but lots of content creators, lots of players everywhere are expressing their frustrations with this. I think people feel disrespected in a way more than anything else. People have a tolerance level for these kinds of decisions where eventually they feel so frustrated or so betrayed by the game that they break away from the game. They go, oh man, I'm just done messing with this. I think we see a lot of people say that on social media. You can't always trust that that's the case, but there are legitimately people who use these as the sort of straw that broke the camel's back. And it's like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I can't trust this game moving forward, or I can't trust the developers. They just keep making decisions that go against my best interests. So I'm done. And what that is people slowly leeching away from the game. Leech probably leached quite a few people away from the game in his era as well, and that's not good for you. So even if these problems don't affect you now, if people leech away from the game, guess what? That's less player base to play against. That's longer queue times. There's like literal immediate impacts to you as a player. But there's also long-term impacts to that as well, because the worse the game does, the more you have to ratchet up these systems to make up the income on everybody else, because you don't have as much of a player base to pull from. So suddenly the sorts of decisions being made continue to get worse and worse and worse for the remaining player base to maintain parity when it comes to things like revenue. In particular, I worry that that's a problem for Marvel Snap, because when people leave Marvel Snap, I don't think there's a good way, or at least a good time, for them to come back. To compare, for instance, to Hearthstone. It's a game I've played for 8 years, right? A lot of people have been frustrated by Hearthstone. A lot of people have left Hearthstone at various points because of similar sorts of decisions in the game in the past, or whatever meta stuff too, right? But Hearthstone has big expansions every 4 months where there's this just awesome, crazy new content drop with tons of new cards, exciting new mechanics, recognizable, beloved characters that all hit at once. And it's this great reattachment point where people can re-enter the ecosystem and get really excited by this awesome content, a big marketing push, and they come back into the game. So you'll see people, leave the game and then come back, and you get this really nice rhythmic kind of flow in Hearthstone. And those gaps are pretty long, honestly, from time to time. There might be a couple months of the valley before the peak happens, but they keep being able to re-engage people. And when you return to Hearthstone, you can get the new content in a controlled fashion where you're buying packs exclusively for that new expansion. So you can come back, you can spend money, and you can play right away with all of the new cards, or at least a large subset of them. But you're not going to be spending your money or time or progression on old stuff. When you leave Marvel Snap, number one, there's not these big, awesome new content cycles to pull you back. Marvel Snap has a bit more of a content drip than a roller coaster. There's little stuff every week, but there aren't these big moments, these big touchstones that get people's attention and bring them back. So number one, it's perhaps harder to re-engage people with the game. And number two, when you do come back to Marvel Snap, I don't know how you engage with the new content. It's really hard and really prohibitively expensive, and actually sometimes just impossible to get enough tokens or spend enough money to buy the new things. So even if you were excited about a new card, even if you were excited about some new content, when you come back to the game, there's no way for you to engage with that right now because of the way the card acquisition system works. So basically, I fear that if Marvel Snap has a player attrition issue and they lose players over time, I don't think there's any getting them back, or at the very least, it's going to be an enormous struggle to get players back into the ecosystem. So I don't know that they can afford to lose players over time, because I don't know how they get those players back. And it's much, much harder, of course, to get a new customer than to retain a customer. That's a famous old line, particularly when you're in a resource loop game like Marvel Snap, where you want to keep getting these like daily missions and daily resources, and it feels like FOMO if you miss out. As soon as you step away from that, it's like it's a switch that flips and people go, oh yeah, I don't need this game anymore. I'm done. I'm out of the loop. I'm out of the system. If I come back, I'm going to be too far behind. I'm not going to have access to new stuff. So you break that connection, and it's so hard once that connection is severed to reconnect it. We actually saw, if you look at these Steam DB charts for Marvel Snap, we can see what the PC player base looks like for Marvel Snap. And these are usually pretty accurate measures. Of course, they're not going to be one-to-one from an absolute value, but they should generally show trend lines very well. And we've seen with Marvel Snap in the last couple months a more notable decline for what had otherwise been a pretty flat player base. Now, that said, the addition of Conquest Mode this week did bring that back a little bit, but it's already starting to drop back to the norms that it was a week ago within just a couple days. And I would argue that you're going to see a higher increase amongst PC players on Steam for something like Conquest Mode than you would on mobile players. Mobile players are going to want shorter sessions. PC players are going to want longer sessions. So I think PC players are more engaged by Conquest Mode on average than mobile players. Speculation, but I think you'll agree that that tracks logically. So you might have seen an even smaller bump among mobile players than you would have among PC players, which means that supports my theory that it's really hard to bring people back into the fold and re-engage them with a content drop like Conquest Mode. That just wasn't enticing enough to re-engage people. At least that's my read on the situation. So what's one of the ways that you could target this? Well, marketing, right? You can bring in new players. If you're losing old players and driving them away, and the best part of Marvel Snap is perhaps the early part with the progression system, you can bring in new players to replace them, right? Yes, you can. And Marvel Snap has done, I think, a really good job historically of marketing and advertising and bringing players in. They've spent a ton of money, both paying people like me to do sponsored videos, but also all kinds of mobile ads and such. And although I don't think they've always been perfect in execution, I think they've gotten the job done. And I think a respectable effort indeed, and a admirable effort for what they've done for marketing the game. That said, this last week, I almost died. Like, I could not handle Marvel Snap's appearance at the Summer Game Fest. And this actually bothered me more than the Darkhawk stuff or the monetization stuff. I've never seen a ball dropped harder than Marvel Snap at Summer Game Fest. And I have to talk through this because it's driving me crazy. And I tweeted about it a little bit. I'll pull that tweet up now so you can kind of get a preview of what I'm talking about. But Marvel Snap at Summer Game Fest was an absolute disaster. They had an audience at Summer Game Fest, which is a big Game Fest event, a bunch of trailers and hype for new video games and stuff. I think when I was watching, it had like 900,000 concurrent viewers, but that was like one stream of many. I would imagine estimates of at least 3 to 5 million people engaged with the Summer Game Fest stream. So that is a potential audience of 3 to 5 million people that Marvel Snap had on the hook because Ben Brode went on stage to talk about Marvel Snap and the launch of Conquest Mode. Suspect Marvel Snap actually had to spend quite a bit of money to get this time and spot at Summer Game Fest, given its promotional nature. So a big investment here and a huge opportunity to reach so many new people. But what happened is it was a little clunky with Ben Brode. Like, I maybe not the most amazing on stage banter, for instance. I can let that slide, right? It's hard to do live stuff. Sometimes things get fumbled. Sometimes there's weird chemistry. I've had that exact same thing happen to me. That is actually not my problem. So that went a little weird, right? It was really more about the content approach behind that caused so much ire for me, because they talked about Conquest Mode and only Conquest Mode, which if you've got 3 to 5 million people, many of which will have never seen or understood what Marvel Snap is, you don't announce an incredibly complex system and game mode within the game. You got to talk about what Marvel Snap is first. You know, for instance, Spider-Verse just came out in theaters right before Summer Game Fest. Everybody's talking about Spider-Verse. You've got Miles and Gwen and Spider-Man 2099 in the game. Show them, talk about it. Hey, we got this crazy new Spider-Verse month. We've got awesome new characters. You know, you saw Spider-Verse, come play them in game. You know, they actually showed on screen instead the graphics that were prepared ahead of time. Again, this wasn't like a fumble in the live execution of the message. These were graphics that were prepped ahead of time. It was a screenshot of the like progression track in conquest mode. So it's like multiple, you know, obscure currencies that people aren't going to understand what they mean. You got medals, you've got credits, you've got boosters, and it's like showing you unlocking the grind over multiple weeks. You don't show a cool graphic of Gwen Stacy being awesome or Miles being awesome. You show a graphic of the resource grind in your mobile game, and you don't even explain why people should be playing Marvel Snap. I almost died. I was like, what is happening? Why are you showing people the worst part of the game? There's so much to love about Marvel Snap's gameplay, and they decided to announce a complex game mode that no one will understand without the context of already knowing what Marvel Snap is. And they highlight it not even with gameplay of the game mode. They don't show like Dexter having an awesome, battle mode battle against Cozy or something. They don't leverage that, or even just the in-game stuff itself with awesome cards and animations and high evolutionary riding the Guardians of the Galaxy hype. They don't show any of that. They show you a resource grind track. It's like nobody's gonna want to play the game when you see a resource grind. Like, that is not enticing. That is not interesting. And it's not just me speculating. If you looked at like the live chats and stuff, people were just memeing so hard on Marvel Snap. I was like embarrassed, almost in a like secondhand embarrassment. Like, oh no, what have they done? Like, what a blown opportunity. How do you get these prepared graphics that don't showcase the game in any sort of positive way? And instead, they just highlighted the absolute worst part of Marvel Snap, which I guess was honest in a way. Like, they weren't hiding a lot of the experience. But man, I couldn't handle that. Like, that sort of stuff drives me crazy because, like, look, we all fumble things. We all make mistakes, right? Like, I obviously make tons of mistakes. Lots of things go wrong. But it felt like this was a really big opportunity. You have to spend the time and the dedication and have the oversight to make sure it's at least directionally right. You want to make sure you're talking about the right sorts of things. If you fumble a little bit when executing on that, sure, that happens. We all understand. It's not going to be perfect. But you weren't even talking about the right things. I think the execution was a little clunky, but also just what was being executed upon didn't make any sense as far as I was concerned. So listen, as always, all of this can come in the context of, well, we don't know their goals, we don't know their plans, we don't know their finances, we don't know any of the behind the scenes details. And of course, that's right. We don't know any of that. We don't see behind the scenes. But what we can see, the data we can see, the qualitative opinions and input that we can see, all the information that we have is kind of pointing in the same direction. And it's a direction that's driving people in many cases away from the game. It's leaving people frustrated by the game. It's not helping to grow the game as far as we can see from numbers. So it's important for us to ask these questions. Like, yeah, we can't connect all the dots behind the scenes, but we can still sort of see the picture. Like, you know what I mean? So we ask the questions. It's up to Second Dinner and Marvel Snap to answer those in ways that are compelling for players, that make people excited about the game, that do the things we need to make the game successful. I don't know. I guess this is me airing my frustrations. I think I had a lot more to talk about, but hopefully this story is complete with all the different tweets and things I show you. And ultimately, who cares what I think, right? I'm just a dude. What's actually important, I want you guys to share your thoughts. How are you feeling about the game? Are you still playing the game a lot? How do you feel about conquest mode? I could actually make a whole separate video on how I don't think conquest mode serves the largest portion of the player base. I made a tweet about this too. The conquest mode's for pretty niche portion of the player base, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but also probably doesn't help the game grow in a lot of ways either. But I actually like conquest mode personally a lot, so I'm not going to get into that too much. Anyway, share your thoughts. What do you think? How are you feeling about the game? Do these things frustrate you? Are you kind of feeling hopeless? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you worried about the future success of the game? Your opinions are what really matter in this, and I want to see if we can capture people's feelings. The story, the sort of moral of the story, the takeaway for me is I still absolutely adore Marvel Snap's gameplay. I absolutely love playing it every second. I play it all the time off stream. I play it on stream. Darn near perfect gameplay. But a lot of the other decision making around it, a lot of the business level decision making, progression decision making, all of that has left me pretty frustrated lately, more so than normal, enough to feel like I needed to make this video. and kind of talk about it and share my frustrations. But I do so not with the goal to dwell on the negativity, not with the goal to, you know, wallow in our misery. I do so with the goal because I want the game to go in the right direction, because I want to keep playing it and keep making content. Like, I want the game to succeed and thrive. And yes, I don't know the behind the scenes to make that happen, but from what I can see, these are the sorts of things I think need to be acknowledged and addressed for the game to succeed. So that's all I got. Thanks for bearing with me through this. I think I got a little ranty at the end with the Summer Game Fest part, but I did my best. I'm still ultimately respectful as best I can be. So thank you for watching. Share your thoughts below, and until next time, game on.